I cannot remember. Did we get to this problem here?
Yes, we're on
Yeah.
that part.
Okay. So we're going to go on and start this problem here. And again, all right, guys, let's focus in. Now, we had two main versions of writing the equation of a line. We had slope-intercept form, our y equals mx plus b, and we had our two-point form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We really use the point slope form as if we're only given a point that's not the y-intercept and the slope. But even if we start in this form here, we want to have our final equation in y equals mx plus b form. That's where we want to finish up. Unless, and it's not going to happen most likely for us here in this class, but the college algebra class did have some questions that ask to put your answer in y equals, or our point slope form. It wanted that as your final answer. Because there are sometimes it'll ask for it in point slope form. All you got to do is plug the information in and you're done. Others, we have to go back to slope intercept. Now, for this one here, the graph shows the distance Allison hiked in X hours. Write an equation of the line and interpret the slope, and then figure out how long does it take Allison to hike 14 miles. So, for one thing, we do need our equation in y equals mx plus b form. We also need to find the slope, and then figure out how long it's going to take her to travel 14 miles. Several different parts. Now we are given 2 points. One of the points is 7, 24.5. What is our other point? 0, 0. So we do have the y-intercept. We actually have the x and y-intercept. They're the same. It is 0, 0. So for our equation, the value of b is 0. Because I could plug in, we could say plus 0, but does adding 0 really add anything to this? No. So we don't necessarily, or not necessarily, we don't need the plus 0. So we have this here. So the only other part that we need to find is the slope. So we can use the slope formula. What is one of our y values, or what y value do we want to plug in first? And the other y value is 0. Our corresponding x would be 7, and then the other corresponding x would be 0.
7, and then we got to
Right here. What? You can just start with this. If you do find the other one, you can copy it over, because I do have a few extras. Now, at this point here, guys, let's focus up here, face forward. Thank you. We could subtract these pretty easily, because we'd really end up with 24.5 over 7. But we cannot have a decimal and a fraction together. We can't have them together. So what we can do instead is we can plug it in. 24.5 over 7 is 3.5. If we really wanted it as a fraction, we could tell the calculator to convert it to a fraction, which is 7/2. But 3.5 works just as well. So y equals 3.5x. So we have the equation of a line. Now we need to interpret the slope. So 3.5 does not have a denominator. So the denominator is understood to be what number? 1. 1. So what it's telling us is that we could really write it as over 1, because the 3.5 is our distance, and 1 is our time. Because with slope, we put change in y on top, change in x on bottom. So we're saying for every hour she travels how far? 3.5 miles. And hopefully she's not trying to hike today. At least today's better than yesterday. Any questions on how we found the equation of the line or the interpretation of the slope? We ready to solve? So we want to find out how long it takes her to travel 14 miles. Will it be more than 10 hours? How far did she go in 7? 24.5 miles, right? 7 hours she went 24.5. So is there any way she could go that beyond 7? I mean, she could travel additionally, but at 7 hours, how far did she travel? And we're wanting to know how long it took her to travel 14, yes? Well, this is just looking at it analytically. So if we're not plugging anything in, so we're going to be somewhere close to 3 probably. But this is also, especially when it comes to the ACT where you're given multiple choice answers, and especially if we're looking at this chart, well, anything above 7 hours is not going to work, right? Because at 7 hours, how far did she travel? 24.5. We're only wanting to know 14. So at 7 hours, she has gone long past 14, yes? So anything greater than 7 or equal to 7 is not going to work. Now, we can use the equation to solve this. Now, the question is, do we plug 14 in for x or for y? Because which one is distance, x or y?
X. Oh, dang it. Oh, no, it's hour. Oops.
X is time and y is distance. So we plug. Yeah, so, well, we are talking about the x and y on the axis, but we're also talking about the x and y in the equation, in the slope. Now we just need to get x by itself. So what can we do? We can divide both sides by 3.5. (14) divided by 3.5 is 4. So the answer is 4 hours. Does 4 hours make sense as the correct answer? Yeah. And again, when you look at any of these here, just kind of take a second, see if it makes sense, especially when we have this kind of connotation. We have an application to it. We're talking about distance traveled. Because especially if we said, I had it flipped, I said 3.5. Yeah. So if I did it the other way, I had 3.5 divided by 14. We plugged it in to try to solve. Does 0.25 or 1/4 make sense for the amount of hours traveled? So we're trying to figure out how long it takes her to travel 14 miles, yes? Does 0.25 or 1/4 of an hour make sense for her to travel that? When we know her traveling 7 hours, she'll go 24 miles.
So are you saying like to get 4 miles?
No, 14.
Oh, 14.
In 15 minutes, really. Well, that doesn't make sense in the context of this problem. Would we agree with that? Yeah. So sometimes, especially when it's a word problem or an application, something we're applying it to, look back at the other information. Does the answer fit with the rest of what we have? If it's either, like we saw, 0.25, that's way too small for this to work. Because 0.25 would be somewhere down here on the graph, nowhere near our 14. So again, sometimes it's just looking critically at it can help, and especially on the ACT, sometimes if we look at it and apply a little bit of logic to how we're doing it, you can sometimes get to the answer. questions on any of this so far? Well, it's a little early, but we have 2 prom venues. Charge a rental fee plus a fee per student. The table shows the costs for different number of students at Lakeside Inn. So we have Lakeside Inn over there. The total cost Y in dollars for X students at Sunview Resort is represented by this equation. We want to figure out which one charges less per student and at what point do they cost the same? Because this is normal. Because you do have different companies charging different things, and especially with rental fees or with shirts, there's going to be an amount that they charge per unit. And figuring out where is going to be cheaper or when you actually need to go somewhere else. Now, one of the nice things is that Sunview gave us an equation. We have this here. It costs Y in dollars for X students at this here. Well, the slope is telling us how much it costs per student. So at Sunview, how much does it cost per student? So Sunview is $10 per student. What does the 600 represent? Because X is the number of students. Because if we had 0 students going, how much was it going to cost? Right, because our rental fee, because any place you go to rent or whatnot, they have a set fee that they charge you. Be it number of people, or if you go and rent a scooter or a pontoon boat for the day, they have a set fee they charge you, flat out. This is what it's going to start at, and then it's going to go up from here. Well, the $600 is our kind of initial cost. This is what it's going to cost to begin with. So their original cost, or their rental fee, is 600 is the rental fee. Now, in terms of the equation, our 10 is the slope, and the 600 would be the what? The y-intercept, because we're going to cross the y-axis. Okay, so we have this. Now we need to get the information for Lakeside. Okay, there we go. Did Lakeside give us the y-intercept or the initial cost? So how much is going to cost us with 0 students? Well, it could be, but they really didn't tell us. They just started at 100 students and went to 200, yes? Okay. So what we have to use for this is not slope-intercept, which we've been using up to this point, our y equals mx plus b. We will get back to that formula, but we have to use our point-slope form first. And with point-slope, there's 2 things we need. We need a point. Well, they gave us 5. Because we have 5 points with those there. But we need, for certain, the slope. Because we need the slope first. Because I could pick any of those points as one of our points for the formula, but we need the slope first. Give me a y value out of those there. Okay. Huh? 2100, 2,100. And its corresponding x value is? Okay. Now we need another y value. Yes. And its corresponding x is 100. It doesn't matter which 2 we pick, we will get the same slope. Because if, again, with stuff like this, they're going to be uniformly set, so it's the same slope's going to be there for any 2 points we pick, as long as you don't pick the same point. Now, at this point here, we can plug this onto the calculator. We don't have to do this by hand. If we did this by hand, it would be 600 over 50, which would be 12. So lakeside charge is $12 per student. Now we do need to find the y-intercept for this here, and it'd also be nice to have the equation. So we're going to get the equation and the y-intercept in kind of one go. Now this is the first time we're using this formula here, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now out of everything here, the only thing that's going to stay the same is our y and x, because the y and x without the subnote, the 1, is actually our input-output, our independent and dependent variables. Now the slope, m, we just found is 12. Now we just need to pick a point. So we can use the top one, 100 for x, and 1500 for y. If they were wanting us to keep this in point slope form, we'd be done. But we want to get it back into y-intercept. So the first thing we can do is distribute 12. Y minus 1500 is equal to 12x minus 1200. And the last thing we need to do is add 1500 to both sides, because we need to get y by itself. And this here will tell us that y is equal to almost plus 300. So the 12x, again, it's our slope. How much it costs per student. It is. And what is the 300? The initial price is our rental price is going to be $300. So, any questions on how we got these two equations? Do we feel comfortable with getting the equations for Sunview prom venue? I hope so, because they gave us Sunviews. At Lakeside, we got also, because we had to find it, our 12x plus 300. Now, looking at these two, which one charges less per student? Sunview. So the first answer is Sunview, because they only charge $10 compared to 12. So I'm going to erase this here. Right, because they have $300 cheaper rental fee. Now the second half of this question is, at what point are they the same? How many students must attend for the total cost to be the same? So that's the real question, is how many students need to attend for the rental cost to not matter, for the overall cost to not matter? So we'll see here, because again, we're trying to see when the y values in these two equations are the what? Same. We're trying to see whether they're the same, yes? So that means we could take these two equations, 10x plus 600, and set it equal to 12x plus 300. What do we want to do first? We can minus 300 from both sides. You wouldn't be wrong to minus 600 from both sides. Or minus 10x or 12x. So we just need to pick one. So we'll do 300. And we minus 300 from both sides. what's next? So we'd minus 10x from both sides. Mm-hmm. And yes, I mean, this is the same as properties of equality. 300 equals 2x is the same as 2x equals 300. And last but not least, we need to so at 150 students, if you knew 150 students were going to be attending, Lakeside or Sunview, which one's the better deal?
Lakeside or Sunview. They're the same.
They're the same at 150, yes? Right. In most of these places, when you do this, especially, I mean, most of y'all are all juniors, so this is something you'll have to be thinking about, is they're not going to charge you for how many actually show up. They're going to charge you for how many you think are going to show up, because they charge you ahead of time. So if you know for certain, or you believe 150 are going to show up, doesn't matter which venue you pick. No, there's no financial decision between that. At that point, you're just deciding on which one you like better. At under 150, we would go Lakeside because it has the cheaper initial cost, so it's going to be lower. If we go over 150, it's going to be Sunview. Because even though they have a higher initial cost, the cost per student is lower and lets the other one catch up.
I wonder when we're going to get our phone.
I do not know. Any questions on any of this here? Any questions on anything we've done so far? How do we feel about finding equations of lines?
It's a lot of steps.
It's a lot of steps.
How do you practice doing that a lot or something, or just?
Some of it is I get quote unquote reps from just doing these here. And some of it it's stuff that I work, I mean, you come across most of the time, calculating what's going to be cheaper per unit, ratios, this, that, and the other.
I know for a fact if I have to pick between one or two.
So, do we need to see another example of one of these here? Yeah, we can go on and do this here. Now, this here is similar to the last one. So I went on and wrote this in here for us so that we have it. Maple Ridge charges a rental fee of $10 per student. The total cost is $1,900 for 140 students. Describe the number of students that must attend for the total cost at Maple Ridge to be less than the total cost at the other two venues. Use a graph to justify your answer. So we need to find the equation first for Maple Ridge. Now, unlike our last one that we did for Lakeside, we didn't have to find the slope for this because they told us the slope is 10. It's our cost per student. But we don't know the rental fee. They did give us a little piece of information. They said the cost is $1,900 for 140 students. So that's a point. $1,900 for 140. $1,900. And just like with the last one, we need to get this equation in the form of y equals. Almost. There we go. And last but not least, we need to Add 1900 to both sides, telling us y is equal to 10x plus 500. So how much does it cost for the initial fee? $500. So this is very close to Sunview. Okay.
Because I just did the 1900 kids.
Yes, that's another way to do it. Because I don't normally use that method in that you do solve for B, but then you got to plug it back in to finish it out. I like this because even once we solve for B, I have the equation. I don't have to do any other steps after it. But that is a correct method. So we have this here. Describe the total number of students that must attend for the total cost of Maple Ridge to be less than the other two. Well, is there any way for Maple Ridge to be more expensive than Sunview? Because they are what? They're the same fee. So the slope is the same. So what do we call two lines with the same slope? Starts with a P. And it's not perpendicular. Parallel. Parallel, because they're parallel lines. They have the same slope. So that means Maple Ridge will never be more expensive than Sunview. So really we're just trying to see when it needs to be cheaper than Lakeside, yes? Well, the easiest spot to find that is where they are the same. Because if we know we're the same, we know less than that is where it's going to work out. So we can say 10x plus 500 is equal to 12x plus 300. And again, we're just going to solve. So the first thing we can do is what? 3 minus 10x from both sides first this time. Telling us 500 is equal to 2x plus 300. Then we would subtract 300 from both sides. Bless you. And lastly, divide by 2. So at 100 kids, they cost the same, yes? So do we need to have it be less than 100 kids or more than 100 kids for Maple to be cheaper?
More. So it needs to be more, wouldn't it? Because the cost per student is cheaper.
Cost per student is cheaper, but something isn't. Because what's not cheaper from one to the other?
The initial value.
Initial value. So guys, let's focus up here. Lakeside starts out cheaper, yes? So until that point of intersection, on a graph, Lakeside should be cheaper, lower. At 100, not 500, 100, they intersect. Which means if Lakeside was below at the intersection, after it, it should be above. So we need more than that for it to be cheaper. Questions on any of this here? For once. We got these over the summer. Any questions on any of this here? Now, we're not going to cover this problem here, but I do want to talk about line of best fit. Line of best fit is really we are taking real world data and drawing a line or an equation, making a line or equation. It could be curved, it could be quadratic, cubic, to best fit the data presented. And we can use that equation to make predictions, because it's not going to be for certain, it's going to be a prediction of what the trend will do. And the closer it is to the line of best fit, the better the data is. So really, what we're looking for is it to be between 1 and 0.95 or -1 and -0.95. We want it within 0.5 of 1 or -1. And the only real difference is that if it's close to 1.5 away from 1 or less, it means the line's going up. If it's within 0.505, go -1, it means just the line's going down. Anything away from that is not significant. Now, again, they use, especially if you don't know statistics, they also talk about this with alpha values. Alpha value, this margin between 1 and -1 is what they're talking about. If it's not less than 0.05, the data means nothing because it's not significant. And again, this is above and beyond, but this is kind of lines of best fit. We don't really do too much with this here, but we do have it, and I'll show you these here. You don't have to write these down. Yes? I think I had them just flipped. Yeah, I've got the arrows flipped. It just needs to be between those. The line of best fit is a line that is as close as possible to all the data points. Many technology tools have a feature to create the line, and the correlation coefficient denoted by R is a number from -1 to 1 that measures how well the line fits the data. When it's close to -1 or 1, it's significant. When it's close to 0, the points do not closely relate to the line. Again, you don't have to write this down. I'm just wanting y'all to see this and know, kind of have a familiarity with it than we are with anything else. But that is all we're doing. And this is the assignment. So I did include the steps if you use the graphing calculator to find the line of best fit. So 1 through 8, yeah. So 1 through 8, you're just finding the equation of line and describing the slope. So write the equation of line, interpret the slope. That's all it's asking you to do. Number 9 is like what we finished up with the prom places. So you're going to figure out which newspaper is cheaper, originally cheaper, and how many lines it costs for them to be the same. So read through and get that. Question number 11. Question number 11. You have to state and fix the mistake. You have to state and fix the mistake. Because if you read the instructions, it does say error analysis in exercise 11:12. Describe and correct the error in interpreting the slope in the context of the solution. So they give you someone's response to it, and there is an error somewhere in there. So you need to find it, kind of state what the error is, and then fix it to what it should be. Kind of what they're talking about, okay? So I can tell you right now, an incorrect answer for number 11 is that they have it right already. Because no, number 11 is wrong in some way. You just have to find it and fix it. Okay?